On the morning of August 5th, 1962, the world awoke to the shocking news. Marilyn Monroe, the goddess of Hollywood, was dead. She was just 36 years old. The official report called it probable suicide by barbiturate overdose. But from the very first hours, the story didn't add up. Her housekeeper said she found the bedroom door locked from the inside. The psychiatrist insisted she had sounded calm the evening before. A bottle of Nembutal pills was found on the nightstand, but curiously, no glass of water. Phone records hinted at mysterious late-night calls, and within days, the FBI had quietly opened a file. Marilyn Monroe was more than a movie star. She was an icon, a fantasy, the very embodiment of American glamour. But she was also entangled in something far more dangerous than Hollywood scandals. Her rumored affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, placed her at the heart of a web of politics, power, and secrecy. For decades, questions have haunted her death. Did Marilyn truly take her own life, crushed by loneliness and addiction? Was it an accidental overdose from the pills that kept her awake at night? Or was she silenced, eliminated, because she knew too much? The truth has been buried beneath layers of contradictions, sealed files, and whispers that refuse to fade. What really happened to Marilyn Monroe in her final days remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. And tonight, we step beyond the glamour, beyond the red carpet, into the shadows of her last hours where the line between tragedy and conspiracy blurs forever. Before she became Marilyn Monroe, she was simply Norma Jean Mortensen. Born on June 1st, 1926, at the Los Angeles County Hospital. Her entry into the world was anything but glamorous. Her mother, Gladys, was a film cutter who struggled with severe mental illness. Her father was absent, his identity shrouded in mystery and denied by multiple men over the years. From the very beginning, Norma Jean was a child without a stable foundation, a girl destined to seek love in places where it would often hurt her most. Her childhood was fractured and unstable. When Gladys was institutionalized, Norma Jean was passed from one foster home to another, shuffled like an unwanted package. For a time, she lived in an orphanage. Other times, she stayed with family friends who barely tolerated her presence. These early years left scars, memories of neglect, abandonment, and a desperate craving for affection that would later shape her relationships as an adult. Yet, even in poverty and chaos, her beauty was unmistakable. Neighbors recall the shy, doe-eyed girl who smiled nervously but carried a strange magnetism. She had dreams of belonging, of being noticed, of transforming into someone the world would finally love. At 16, to avoid returning to the orphanage, Norma Jean married James Doherty, a neighborhood boy. It wasn't love, it was survival. While he went to war, she worked in a munitions factory, spraying airplane parts with fire retardant. One afternoon, a military photographer spotted her. The camera adored her instantly. What began as a set of pinup photos for the war effort soon turned into modeling contracts, and from there, the studio system came calling. Norma Jean Mortensen vanished. In her place, Hollywood crafted Marilyn Monroe, a name chosen for its shine, a persona designed to seduce the world. But inside, the fragile girl who once longed for a mother's embrace never disappeared. This duality, Marilyn the goddess, Norma Jean the orphan, would haunt her for the rest of her life. It was the contradiction at her core, a clash between the icon the world demanded and the vulnerable soul hidden behind the smile. And as much as the spotlight illuminated her, it also magnified her deepest wounds. When Norma Jean transformed into Marilyn Monroe, the Hollywood machine wasted no time molding her into its next starlet. In 1946, she signed her first contract with 20th Century Fox. The studio executives urged her to bleach her hair platinum blonde, narrow her name to something simple, and practice a smile that seemed innocent yet irresistible. Slowly, the Norma Jean identity was erased, and Marilyn Monroe was born. Her early roles were minor, bit parts in films like Scudda Who, Scudda Hey, where she barely had a line, or Dangerous Years, where her presence flickered briefly on screen. But even with a few seconds of airtime, audiences noticed her. Casting directors began to whisper that there was something different about this young woman, an allure that couldn't be taught. Marilyn worked tirelessly. She studied acting at night, posed for photographers by day, and accepted whatever roles came her way. Yet behind her ambition was a clear understanding. In Hollywood's golden age, beauty could open doors, but survival required more than a pretty face. Her first breakthrough came through modeling. Those pin-up photographs that once boosted wartime morale now circulated in magazines across America. GIs taped her photos inside their lockers. Men bought magazines just to glimpse her smile. She became one of the most sought-after pin-up models of the late 1940s, rivaling icons like Betty Grable. That recognition caught the eye of film producers who believed she could be more than a calendar girl. In 1950, she appeared in The Asphalt Jungle, a noir film directed by John Huston. Her role was small but unforgettable. Audiences left theaters asking, "Who was that blonde?" That same year, she played Claudia Caswell in All About Eve, another tiny part in a critically acclaimed film. The New York Times didn't even mention her by name, yet industry insiders noted her presence. She had the ability to steal a scene without uttering more than a few words. Marilyn's determination was relentless. She enrolled in acting classes with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, immersing herself in method acting techniques that gave depth to her performances. Critics often dismissed her as just another blonde bombshell, but Marilyn was intent on proving she had substance. Still, the climb was not without cost. To keep her contracts, she endured the notorious casting couch culture of Hollywood. Studio executives manipulated her career, dictating her weight, her public image, even her relationships. She was expected to be perpetually charming, forever radiant, the living fantasy of millions of men. By the early 1950s, her persistence began to pay off. Films like Clash by Night, 1952, and Don't Bother to Knock revealed a vulnerability beneath the glamour. Critics started to recognize her not only as a beauty, but as a performer with emotional depth. Audiences leaned closer. Marilyn Monroe was no longer a background face. She was a rising star. And soon, she would step into a spotlight so bright that it would define her, exalt her, and ultimately, consume her. By the early 1950s, Marilyn Monroe had shed her bit part obscurity and ascended into a phenomenon. Hollywood was crowded with aspiring actresses.
Her charms as she lured men on and on to their eternal destruction. And her own...
She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic.
It's Marilyn Monroe skyrocketing to new dramatic heights.
Her breakthrough came
a man
in
took her love spell.
1953
Jean
with
Peters
Niagara,
caught in the destructive whirlpool of another's deceit.
Plotting her husband's murder.
Girl.
The film
Why, hi.
showcased Marilyn
Don't worry
not as
about
a
that.
background blonde,
Yankee Stadium.
but as a force
Smell
of
like a
nature.
dime store. I know what that means.
Audiences were captivated.
His nor
Critics
any
called her
man's
both
completely.
dangerous and
And that
irresistible.
thought whipped him into a
And
frenzy
suddenly,
that makes the...
she was no longer a name on the margins. She was the headline. That same year, she starred in Gentlemen
You can't.
Prefer
You'll be torn to
Blondes
pieces.
alongside Jane Russell. The numbered diamonds are a girl's best friend cemented her place in pop culture history. Dressed in a pink satin gown, dripping with jewels, Marilyn became the ultimate fantasy of post-war America. Glamorous, playful, and unattainable. The film grossed millions, and Fox realized they had their new queen. But it was the 7-year itch, 1955, that elevated her to legend. In that iconic scene where a gust of wind blew her white dress above her knees, Marilyn's image became one of the most recognizable photographs of the 20th century. Though the film itself was a light comedy, the single still frame of her laughing above the subway grate defined an era. It wasn't just a movie moment, it was a cultural explosion. Marilyn had become the most bankable star in Hollywood. Studios knew her name alone could fill theaters. In 1959, she starred in Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder. The production was chaotic. Marilyn often arrived late, stumbled over lines, and frustrated the crew. But when the cameras rolled, she was electric. Her performance as Sugarcane earned her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy. Wilder later admitted she was a nightmare to direct, but pure magic on screen. The numbers told the story. By the late 1950s, Marilyn was one of the top 10 box office draws in America. Her films collectively grossed over $200 million worldwide, a staggering figure for the time. She graced the covers of Life, Time, and countless fan magazines. In 1953, she even posed as the very first cover girl for Playboy, igniting controversy but also cementing her status as the ultimate sex symbol. Yet beneath the fame, Marilyn fought to be taken seriously as an actress. She grew weary of being typecast as the dumb blonde. In 1955, she founded her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, an unprecedented move for a female star in that era. This was her declaration of independence, a bid to escape the studio's control and select roles with more dramatic weight. The gamble worked. In Bus Stop, 1956, she stunned critics with a raw, heartfelt performance. For the first time, reviewers acknowledged her as more than a pretty face. She was an actress of substance. Still, fame came at a personal cost. Her marriages told a story of longing and heartbreak. In 1954, she wed baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. The union of America's favorite ball player and its brightest star was dubbed a fairy tale, but reality was harsher. DiMaggio was jealous of her fame and uncomfortable with her provocative image. The marriage collapsed in just 9 months. In 1956, she married playwright Arthur Miller. For a time, Marilyn believed she had found intellectual companionship, a partner who saw beyond the glamour. She converted to Judaism, moved to New York, and immersed herself in Miller's artistic circle. But even this marriage unraveled, strained by her insecurities and his inability to understand the depths of her fragility. Despite her personal turmoil, the public saw only the dazzling exterior, the red carpet gowns, the award shows, the applause. She was photographed with presidents, celebrated in Europe, adored across the globe. Wherever Marilyn went, the world followed. By the end of the 1950s, she had achieved what few ever could: immortality in her own lifetime. She was no longer merely a star. She was an icon, the very definition of Hollywood glamour. But even as she basked in the spotlight, shadows gathered around her. The orphan girl named Norma Jean had become the most desired woman in the world. And yet, behind the camera flashes and champagne toasts, her loneliness deepened. It was in this fragile space, between glory and despair, that the seeds of her downfall were sown.
As the 1960s began, the flawless image of Marilyn Monroe started to fracture. To the public, she was still the dazzling starlet, but privately, she was unraveling under the weight of her fame, her addictions, and her dangerous connections. Marilyn's life was dominated by pills, barbiturates to sleep, amphetamines to wake, tranquilizers to calm her anxiety. Doctors prescribed them freely, and she carried bottles everywhere. Friends recalled her slurred speech, her frequent blackouts, the nights when she would simply collapse mid-conversation. Yet, whenever the cameras turned on, she somehow summoned that radiant smile. But her personal demons were only part of the darkness. By 1961, whispers circulated that Marilyn was involved with the most powerful men in America, President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Rumors suggested she was not just a fling, but dangerously close to the political inner circle. She attended elite parties, dined with the Kennedys, and was rumored to have recorded details of private conversations. The world glimpsed this closeness in May 1962 when Marilyn famously sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" to John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. Draped in a skin-tight, sparkling gown, her sultry voice filled the arena. The performance was broadcast to millions, and the audience gasped. It was less a birthday greeting than an intimate serenade. For many, it confirmed the affair. For political insiders, it signaled danger. Shortly after that night, Marilyn's behavior became more erratic. She reportedly told friends she felt used, discarded, and silenced by the men who once adored her. There were claims that she confided in her therapist about secrets too explosive concerning national security,
Haunting
Cuba,
her charms
and
as
even
she
the
lured
mafia.
men on and
Whether
on
true
to their
or
eternal
exaggerated,
destruction.
those
And
whispers
her own
caught the attention of the FBI and
have a fight.
CIA.
Never wanna
Indeed,
leave you.
declassified
It's Marilyn
FBI
Monroe
files
skyrocketing to
confirmed
new
that
dramatic
Marilyn was
heights.
under surveillance
When a man
in
took
her
her
final
love spell.
years.
Gene
J.
Peters
Edgar
caught in the
Hoover's
destructive
bureau tracked
whirlpool
her
of
phone
another's
calls and
deceit.
movements,
Correct.
noting her
pretty
left-wing
girl.
associations,
Why hide?
her friendship with
Don't
known
worry about
communists,
that.
and her political
Yankee
statements.
Stadium.
To
Smell
the
like a dime
intelligence
store. I know what
community,
that means.
Marilyn was no
Phew,
longer
I
just a
mean-
movie
His nor
star.
any man's
She was a
completely.
liability.
And that thought whipped him into
Meanwhile,
a frenzy
her
that
career
makes
was
the
faltering. On the set of Something's Got to Give in 1962, she was often late, sometimes missing entire days of
You'll be
filming.
torn to pieces.
Studio executives, furious at the delays and mounting costs, fired her from the production. A final humiliation for the actress who had once been Hollywood's golden girl. Life magazine cruelly published photos of her naked swim scene from the unfinished film,
Once upon a
exploiting
time,
her,
there was a
even
prince.
as her career crumbled.
He was very rich.
Her relationships were
but
equally
he was
destructive.
lonely.
She
She
clung
wasn't
to the
lonely
hope of
either.
reconciliation with
And the
Joe
prince thought it would be
DiMaggio,
rather
even as
nice
she
to have the
drifted
showgirl
further
up to
into
his
depression.
apartment to,
She fought with Arthur
to have a
Miller,
midnight
who had
supper.
remarried
And
seemed to
maybe
resent
look,
her
this little
instability.
showgirl had a few
Friends
ideas of
described
her
her
own.
Beverly Hills
What
home as a
on
place of endless phone calls, empty
You
pill
made a
bottles,
pass
and
and I turned it
paranoia.
down.
Yet the
I was
greatest
going to
fear
say,
came from her
always,
ties to
always
the
do.
Kennedys.
Always?
Witnesses later claimed Robert Kennedy visited her the day she died, perhaps to sever ties or to
Cleaned out,
retrieve incriminating evidence.
Where?
Others
in there?
alleged she kept a red diary filled with
I
secrets
love you.
about the president, Cuba, and political deals. If such a book existed, it vanished after her death. The lines between rumor, fact, and conspiracy blurred. What is clear is that Marilyn Monroe was caught in a storm much larger than herself. She was no longer simply a tragic actress. She had become entangled in a web of politics, intelligence, and power, where even a whisper could be deadly. And just months after serenading the president, she would be found lifeless in her bedroom, her death officially labeled a suicide, but forever shadowed by doubt. On the night of August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe retreated into her Brentwood home in Los Angeles. It was a modest Spanish-style house filled with half-packed boxes and scattered notes, a place that reflected both transition and turmoil. She had recently been rehired by Fox for Something's Got to Give, and some believed her career might recover, yet those who saw her that day described her as fragile, drifting between optimism and despair. Around 7 p.m., she spoke on the phone with her friend, actor Peter Lawford. He later recalled her slurred voice and her ominous farewell. Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy. Concerned, Lawford tried to reach her again, but the line went dead. At approximately midnight, her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, noticed a light under Marilyn's bedroom door. When there was no response to her calls, she grew uneasy. By 3:30 a.m., Murray phoned her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who rushed to the house. Finding the door locked, he broke a window and climbed inside. There, on the bed, lay Marilyn Monroe, face down, nude, a telephone in her hand. Nearby was an empty bottle of Nembutal. The official police report concluded probable suicide due to overdose, but nearly every detail raised suspicion. There was no glass of water to swallow the dozens of capsules. Witnesses gave conflicting times for when she was found. The coroner's office reported lethal levels of barbiturates, yet her stomach was unusually empty, suggesting the drugs may have been administered differently. Then there was the missing evidence. Neighbors claimed they saw multiple cars outside her home that night. Some suggested Robert Kennedy had visited her hours before her death. Her alleged red diary, said to contain political secrets, vanished without trace. Even Eunice Murray, her housekeeper, later changed her story in interviews, admitting she had been told to remain quiet. To the press, the narrative was simple: a lonely starlet overwhelmed by fame and heartbreak. But behind the headlines, whispers of foul play grew louder. Was Marilyn silenced because she threatened to expose her affairs with the Kennedys? Did she know too much about Cuba, organized crime, or government secrets? Or was it simply the tragic culmination of years of depression and addiction? Whatever the truth, that night ended the life of Hollywood's brightest star. At just 36 years old, Marilyn Monroe's fall was complete, sudden, brutal, and shrouded in mystery.
Marilyn Monroe's death on August 5, 1962, shocked the world, but it also immortalized her. In life, she had been adored, criticized, objectified, and misunderstood. In death, she became a myth, a timeless icon whose image still haunts popular culture. Her funeral, arranged by Joe DiMaggio, was small and intimate. Only a handful of Hollywood insiders attended. DiMaggio banned most of the studio executives and political figures he blamed for her downfall. For the next 20 years, he sent roses to her grave 3 times a week. It was a gesture of devotion and guilt, a reminder that behind the legend was a woman who had longed simply to be loved. Culturally, Marilyn's influence never faded. Her image of her white dress billowing over the subway grate, her voice whispering, "Happy birthday, Mr. President," her sultry gaze framed by platinum curls. These moments became etched into history. She inspired generations of artists, from Andy Warhol's silk screens to Madonna's reinventions. Every decade, new actresses are called the next Marilyn, yet none ever truly match her. Her story also became a cautionary tale. Marilyn embodied the dream of Hollywood stardom, but also its price: the exploitation, the loneliness, the crushing demands of fame. To this day, her death remains one of the most debated mysteries in entertainment history. Theories of suicide, accident, or assassination continue to fuel documentaries, books, and films. Each retelling only deepens her aura as both goddess and ghost. In the end, Marilyn Monroe was more than an actress. She was a mirror reflecting America's obsession with beauty, power, and desire. She lived fast, loved recklessly, and died too young. And yet her presence endures, shimmering like a candle that refuses to go out. More than 60 years later, the world is still asking the same question: what really happened to Marilyn Monroe? The mystery of Marilyn Monroe's final days continues to fascinate and disturb. Was she a fragile soul who succumbed to her demons, or a woman silenced by forces too powerful to confront? The truth may never be fully known,
But her story reminds us that behind every icon is a human being, vulnerable and yearning. What do you believe happened to Marilyn Monroe? Was it suicide, an accident, or something far more sinister? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your theories.